On May 17th, 18-year-old Salvador Ramos walked into a gun store and legally bought a semi-automatic rifle and 375 rounds of ammo. On May 24th, he walked into Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas, and killed 19 children and 2 adults. This tragedy could have easily been avoided. Gun laws in America need to be addressed. I normally do Christian ministry videos, but I felt this topic was so important that it deserves some attention. So today, I want to talk about fixing gun laws in America. Now, right now, this issue is dividing the left and the right and just pushing us further apart and dividing us as a country. And I'm not a Democrat or a Republican, and I'm definitely not a politician. And I don't know all the details for how to implement this, but I want to propose a new system of gun laws that I believe will save lives and save our freedoms, all while falling perfectly in line with the Constitution. But before I present this new set of laws, I want to talk about a few things first. So first of all, it's okay to disagree, and even to disagree peaceably. We can have different perspectives, different opinions, and disagree and still be friends. In fact, I believe disagreeing is a good thing, because if any two people agree on everything, then at least one of them has stopped thinking. So even before, I want to talk about how bad things are in the U.S. What are the actual numbers, the statistics of gun-related murders and deaths? So last year, there were 24,576 murders. That's a lot, and that's really bad, but let's compare this to a few other things. So this, out of 100,000 citizens, this is 7.5 murders per year. And compared to the world, out of 200 nations, that we're the 76th worst. So that means there are 75 nations on earth that are worse than us. So this means that we are not like the number one most dangerous place in the world to live, but compared to most other developed, affluent, well-organized nations, there is a lot of room for improvement. And I think that we can bring these numbers much further down and make it much safer to be a citizen in our country. Now, I also want to talk about some of the arguments against changing gun laws, why people are very hesitant to even talk about this subject, and why some people think that laws really don't even need to be changed at all. And I want to answer some of those concerns. So first, is that violence is a heart issue and a mental health issue which cannot be eradicated by laws. This is true. No matter what the laws are, no matter how safe things are, as long as people in their heart still have evil and hatred for others, there's still going to be violence and murder. And even as long as people have mental health issues, that there's still going to be the chance of violence. And of course, as a pastor and a minister, I have a lot to say about the heart issues, but I'm not going to get into that today. I'm just going to say that we have facts that 80% of murders in the U.S. involve guns. So gun laws need to be addressed. Next question is that if we give away some freedoms, then those on the left are just going to take more. If we give them an inch, they're going to take a mile. If we give away some of our guns, they're just going to try to take more. Again, I believe this is true, but we don't need more restrictions. So let's protect our freedoms and our rights to bear arms by establishing more reasonable laws, which means that gun laws need to be addressed. And then finally, we see that the cities with the most gun violence are almost always the cities with the strictest gun control laws. So we don't need more restrictions. Absolutely, we don't need more restrictions. We need more balanced freedoms. So those laws in those cities obviously aren't working. So gun laws need to be addressed in this nation. Now let's look at what we actually have. So and especially the Second Amendment. So just a very brief reminder, the U.S. Constitution is our piece of government. Everything we do, every law is supposed to be based on what the Constitution says. That was established just a few years after our nation was founded, and all of our laws should be based on the Constitution. Now the first 10 additions or amendments to the Constitution, we call that our Bill of Rights. And that's where we find our most basic freedoms. So along with those 10, number 2, the Second Amendment is the only one that directly addresses guns. So let's look at the Constitution and see what it specifically says. The Second Amendment, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Now, when you hear people on the right, they almost always talk about the second half of the Second Amendment, but they almost never talk about the first. You hear people talk about the right to bear arms shall not be infringed, but that's really only half of the Second Amendment. Now, let's just do a brief definition of a militia. That is an organized group of armed civilians. So they can serve different purposes for peace, for war, for defense, but it's an organized group of people with arms, but they are not overseen by the federal government, and they're free to do a lot of things independently as that organized militia. So going back to the Second Amendment with that, knowing that is the militia, the way I interpret the Second Amendment is that gun ownership and usage should be somewhat regulated, but not by the federal government. It should be regulated on a smaller local level, not laws for the entire nation. So I want to explain two things, because when it comes to guns, there are two things which can lead to disaster. So first is when every person has access to all firearms. People that are unstable mentally, people that hate different groups, those are the types of people that should not have access to firearms. When everyone has unlimited firepower, this violence increases. There needs to be some regulation. That's even what the Second Amendment says. But the second thing, which can be even more dangerous, is when the government is able to control who has access to the guns. Because if one party or one group gets in power and really dominates, then they're able to disarm their opponents and just take control and just really oppress the people. So the government needs to not be the ones who controls access to the guns. So let's just look at a few more facts, and I want to explain those two things a little bit more. So if the government is allowed to decide who can own guns, oppression is very, very likely to follow. The perfect example is Nazi Germany. The Germans made it to where the Jewish people were not able to have arms, so they couldn't defend themselves. So when the Nazis had power, they were able to put them in those terrible concentration camps, and they were able to just completely oppress and kill them because they weren't able to defend themselves. So if the government decides who has guns, it's very likely that oppression is going to follow. Now, if you want to ask, the largest armed force in the world is not any military. It's American citizens. We have 85 million citizens who own a total of more than 400 million guns. So, along with many other things and blessings, the reason why the U.S. has never had an invasion or anything like that is because of this. We are safe by power. We're safe because 85 million citizens is the largest armed force in the world. So along with this, if the government tries to take those guns, there will likely be a second civil war, and millions of people will die, and that is a terrible thing that should be avoided at all costs. But even if nothing changes, if we don't change any of the gun laws, then many unnecessary deaths will continue to occur, like the one in Uvalde that I mentioned earlier. So that's why we need a new solution. We need something that's constitutional. We need something that secures our freedoms along with saving lives. So here, after that lead up, I want to talk about the actual solution. And it's not really a new solution. It goes back to a much older solution. We need to form modern militias. We need organized groups of armed citizens that are not regulated by the national federal government. Let me explain 3 points about this new law, about this new set of rules that I want to propose. And again, I want to hear what you guys have to say. I want to hear what are some strengths, what are some weaknesses, what are some ways that we could actually implement this. But there are three things I want to describe about how I think this would work. So first is that militia groups should be formed based on city, state, ethnicity, our beliefs, or anything else. And a person must obtain membership to one of these militias to be able to legally purchase firearms. So again, it's any group, any way that people decide to organize. It's not at a federal level, it's at a local level, but however people want to organize themselves, that's how it should be done. Now this should stop discrimination from preventing any person from owning guns. As long as any group, any belief can form militias, then anyone will continue and maintain that right to bear arms and to defend themselves. So the second thing I want to talk about is that membership requirements should be set at the discretion of each individual militia group. So things like firearm proficiency, a psychological evaluation, criminal record, gun safety classes, a registry of guns, drug testing, regular check-ins with a sponsor, all of these types of things. These are the types that a group, a militia, might have as examples for what would be required for someone to join their group. So along with this, the membership can include levels of authorization. So if someone just wants a handgun to defend their house or a hunting rifle for hunting, then they might just need, a 5-minute interview and a basic background check. But if someone wants to go much further and get basically military grade weapons, then it might require almost all of the things that I mentioned, a much more in-depth analysis to really see if that's the type of person that's likely to commit a horrendous crime with those guns. And then the third and final and maybe most important part of what I think would really work is that if a member of any group, any militia group, commits a crime using a gun, then that group can face lawsuits to show that they did all due diligence in allowing that person to become a member. So it would, if someone goes and shoots a school, then and they're a member of your group, then that group has to prove we did everything. We did a psychological evaluation, we checked in with him, we did all the things we could, but he just sort of went crazy. And then it would be up to that court of law to determine the punishment, whether it's financial or even time in prison. It would be up to a court to determine what the punishment, if anything, would be if a member of your group commits a crime. Now, when we look at this, holding the group accountable for their members will cause these militias to be very, very careful in determining their membership requirements. They're going to be very diligent to see if that person is likely to go commit a crime because they don't want to be held responsible for the actions of their members. So again, if we have high accountability, then we're going to have high standards for who does and doesn't own a gun. So if we implement these three things, there are some really important things that it will ensure and really help for our nation. So first of all, it's going to be sure that the rights of those who should be allowed to have guns will not be infringed. It's also going to be sure that those who shouldn't have guns can't get them legally. And maybe most importantly, it's that the federal government doesn't get to decide who should or shouldn't have guns. So along with all of those things, maybe another added bonus is that these militia groups will be a huge deterrent for the government ever turning on American citizens. I promise you, the Texas militia would be a mighty force to be reckoned with, and no government, even including the U.S., would want to have trouble with the Texas militia. So I think this would work. Again, I think it would save our freedoms, and I think it would save our rights to protect ourselves from any government, whether foreign or local. So I want to hear what you guys have to say. Do you think this would work? Is there anything I should change? Anything that I didn't mention in this video? And I just want to share a few parting words with a few specific groups. So first, to my liberal friends, the right to bear arms is arguably the most important freedom we have. All other rights are protected by the Second Amendment. Taking guns out of the hands of good citizens will do nothing but make them easier targets for the people who are bad. A great quote is that the only way to stop a bad person with a gun is a good person with a gun. We absolutely must, as a nation, have the right to defend ourselves, or crime will just increase, violence and murders will increase rapidly if good people aren't allowed to have guns. To my conservative friends, it's time to make some common sense concessions. Even the Second Amendment clearly talks about a well-regulated militia. There are regulations built into the Constitution. If you don't agree to some changes soon, then leftists will likely push for much more restrictive changes to gun laws in the near future. And right now, about 70% of Americans favor more strict gun control laws. So the time to make some wise changes that will save lives and protect our freedoms. If we don't agree to some changes soon, some worse things, more restrictions are gonna come this way. So I think this is a great way to protect our freedoms and to save lives. And then finally, to my Christian friends, we need to lead the way when it comes to love, unity, and peace. This is a very sensitive topic, and we're all free to disagree and have better ways that we think these problems can be solved, but we need to remember to do so in love and respect regarding this issue, along with any other topic of disagreement as well. We need to lead with love, unity, and peace. So again, I thank you so much for listening. I want to hear what you guys have to say. I usually do Christian videos about how to put your faith into practice, and that includes even speaking to the government and trying to work on regulations and just how to make citizens more safe. So if you'd like to hear more about the Bible and how to put your faith into practice, I hope you'll like, subscribe, and follow this page. God bless.